politician, and I'm not in my comfort zone when I've stood on a stage in front of strangers, pouring my heart out about why I'm in UKIP and why I think UKIP's the right thing for everyone to vote for. I was born in Ashington Hospital, and I grew up in Stakefold. I went to Stakefold First School, then Westleigh Middle, then Bedlington High. And during my teens, my dad, who was a miner, was one of those on strike. And my mum worked in the local job centre part-time. And during that strike, there was a field, which is now a modern housing estate, planted up with potatoes. And I have, with my bare hands, been in that field on an evening, digging for those potatoes. I did think Stakefold had fireflies at the time, and it wasn't until some time later I realised it was the cigarette ends glowing in the dark of all the other people in the potato field. Now, when I was at Stakefold First School, I had great difficulty settling in, and I didn't fit in. And it was because I was being sexually abused at home. I tried telling the teachers, and rather than helping me, they decided to label me as a disruptive bad influence. I then left home at 15 and did a bit of sofa surfing, before eventually doing a YTS, which took me into hotels, fish and chip shops and bars. Finally, when I got my head together, I joined the civil service. I just went for a year before going to university, and 23 years later I was still there. During that time, I had 3 children and a marital breakdown because of the child abuse I'd gone through. And the child abuse that I've already tried to go to trusted people in my community to, and been failed. So I did adult disclosure. Again, initially, I was failed and the community I lived in turned their back on me and accused me of being a liar. I had death threats, and I had people coming to the house in the middle of the night, and I was in that house on my own with 3 young children. So I moved out of Stakefold. That is why I don't live here. I haven't been parachuted in, I've come back. Because home is where the heart is, and I've now got the courage to come back here and make this place a better place for my children. So anyone that tells you I've been parachuted in or I left this through choice, I didn't. I left because I've been let down by the local authorities in this area as a victim of child abuse. My dad is now a convicted paedophile, and you will probably read something about that in the press very soon. I'm not ashamed of that. I did nothing wrong. Now, during my 20 years in the civil service, I worked in the local dole offices in this area, so I have first-hand knowledge of the level of poverty in this region. I then moved to Newcastle to manage the National Identity Fraud Unit, and my final role before leaving was as the manager of the North East and Cumbria Area Investigation Services for organised criminal activity. So I don't think that's too bad for a little lass whose dad was a striking miner who was sexually abused for 13 years. I think I've come a long way, and I think I've shown I've got the tenacity and the courage to get up and stand up and do the right thing for people. And that's why I've put myself right here in front of you all now, because I believe if I can do it, anybody can do it. And I love Wansbeck, and I'm so sad that there's been so little of change or investment in this region, and the lack of political will really angers me. This area has been Labour for as long as I can remember, and it's also been neglected for as long as I can remember. We have the highest rate of unemployment in the country at just under 8%, and the highest levels of poverty, with just under 60,000 people in the North East using food banks last year alone. And if we look at any traditional Labour stronghold, they've all got the same structural problems. There is a pattern that we've come to expect in Labour strongholds, and that's not what I've ever voted for, and I don't believe anybody here has voted for it. This is why I believe in UKIP, because with UKIP, without adding a penny to the national debt, and without cutting vital services, and without raising taxes, UKIP will invest an extra 12 billion into the NHS and put 5.2 billion more into social care. They'll build a dedicated military hospital, and they'll abolish hospital car parking charges. We'll end income tax on the minimum wage, abolish the so-called bedroom tax, and increase the transferable personal tax allowance for married couples and civil partners. We'll fund 6,000 additional posts across the police service, prison service and border agency. And we'll cut business rates for small businesses. We'll waive tuition fees for students at university in science, technology, engineering, maths and medicine degrees. If you want to be a doctor or you want to be a nurse, we'll help you do it and we won't make you pay for it. And we'll increase our defence spending to the 2% of gross domestic product, which is what we have gone into with an agreement on NATO. We will meet those obligations. We'll invest £1.5 billion into mental health and dementia services. And we'll pay carers an extra £572 a year, just to show we do care. We'll abolish the ATOS-style assessments that Labour Party introduced, and we'll return the decision-making to the GPs and the surgeons who know these people and know whether or not they're ill. We'll build 500 affordable homes every year for veterans and 8 halfway house hostels for homeless veterans. And we'll remove stamp duty on the first £250,000 for new homes built on brownfield sites and build 200,000 houses a year, each year in the next term of Parliament. Now there's nothing there I can argue with or dispute. And UKIP is the only party that offers you an independently fully costed manifesto. The others will have to make huge cuts to our services and welfare, but they're not going to tell you before you vote whether you're one of those that will be affected. And they'll also have to increase taxes to meet the commitments and the follies and promises they're now making. Worst case scenario, and most likely, is they'll have to do both because they're pandering to the whims of the European Union. And only UKIP can and will end our membership to the European Union. We need to get out as soon as possible, otherwise by 2020, I rather fear we'll all be European citizens trading in euros. There will be no British, English, Irish, Scottish or Welsh, and there will be no pounds and pennies. And the Tories, I think in this area, at least said soon as mended, because they've done nothing but treat us with contempt. But Labour, they take our votes and us for granted. And in Wansbeck specifically, I would like to see the end of the car parking charges at hospitals. It's a bit of a tax on the poorly. I want the improved local rail services we've been getting promised year after year after year, and it only ever comes up 6 months before a general election and then drops off the agenda. I want priority housing for veterans and local people. A lot of people, since the mining industry declined here, go into the armed forces and they come back to nothing, and they've took a double whammy on the bedroom tax for the parents. And I want to see real investment in our high streets. I don't want to see little local exercises where we do nice front signs to try and encourage people. I will put posters up in the empty shops. I want to see business back in those shops. The only way we'll create real jobs is by generating that business. And I want everyone to stop listening to Labour's lies about UKIP. I want you to come to my public meetings. I want you to come to somebody from UKIP and get the facts, not the fiction. I would like everyone to make an informed choice when they vote. And it's time for change. For the first time ever, giving the people of Wansbeck a real choice. But to continue doing the same thing again and again and vote Labour, you're not going to get change. If you're expecting a different outcome, it's nothing more than mad. We need change, and together I know we can get change. That's why I'm asking you to vote for Melanie Hurst and vote for UKIP.